Hello, everybody. Good morning. It is Monday, and with me, I guess I'll say first, welcome to Work Hard. I'm your host, Ethan. With me is my co-host, Jason.
Good morning, everybody.
We are, for the regular Hyper Premium listeners, not just the Work Hard listeners, everyone will know that I blew my back out this week, so we weren't able to record on Saturday because I couldn't sit up. But Jason is very generously driven to my house today on a Monday to make sure we get a couple episodes in so that we can keep our regular schedule up. So thank you, Jason. I appreciate that.
I was bribed with cigars.
That's true. Jason was bribed with cigars. And there's also, I think there's warm beer in my truck. If you're interested in warm Coors at 10 a.m. on a Monday.
If it was anything but Coors. I don't mind lukewarm beer if it's a good beer. Lagers should be a little cool at least.
I think you're right about that. I think if anything, lagers should be a little cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not saying ice cold.
There we go. All right. I wanted to turn you up a little bit. Yeah, not ice cold, but
beer,
rodeo cool at least.
Beer or ale historically is not necessarily a cold. If it predates refrigeration, obviously it wasn't
right.
Always meant to be drunk ice cold.
Right.
Just like you're not supposed to put necessarily ice cubes in whiskey.
Yeah, apparently that's a big sin. I didn't know that.
I think it's because it waters down the flavor and cools it, so you don't get as much of the flavor when it's cold. It dulls the flavor, so you get less of it.
Okay.
If it's not at the right temperature. That's my understanding.
Okay.
I'm not enough of a whiskey head to know. That's just from a little bit of cursory research I've done.
Yeah, me neither. I wouldn't know anything about that. I'm not a big whiskey guy. Always been a rum man myself. All right. On the docket today, we have, if you're not an internet person, you probably won't know about this, which is fine. But there's an ad that came out for New St. Andrews College, which is a
liberal arts college.
Yeah, a liberal arts college in Idaho that's run by I guess it's probably not run by him, but it was started by this pastor named Doug Wilson, who's probably the most, would you say he's currently the most popular post-mill theologian / pastor? Is that like a good way to describe him?
I don't know who else is as widely known a post-mill pastor.
Okay.
So I'd say he is maybe the most up and coming, since COVID has had an explosion of influence.
Yeah. That's a good, So he's had an explosion of influence since COVID because he was one of the few people who immediately stood up.
Right. And said this is government overreach.
Right.
And we should not close down for this. We don't stop worshiping and gathering together because the government.
Right.
And I think it's not like they threw caution to the wind. I think they were cautious at first, is my understanding. It wasn't like they were like, what, 2 weeks? Never.
Right.
But it was like, I think they came back as quickly as anybody did publicly.
Yeah.
And had public psalm sings.
So they got arrested? One of their elders got arrested?
Multiple people in the crowd got arrested.
Okay.
His grandson, Rory, got harassed by police.
Nice.
And is still in ongoing court battles.
Excellent.
Which I think has risen to the state level for putting stickers up on like stop signs in public place, not on stop signs, but I don't remember where he put them, but apparently there's a town law. What do you call those? Not a law, but an ordinance. There was an ordinance against it, which had never ever been used to prosecute anyone before, despite having like babysitters and lost dog posters everywhere, which were technically also against the ordinance.
Right.
But they targeted him.
Right.
Because they knew he was the one who had put it, and because he was a Wilson.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and the city council there, I think they like hate him. They hate that family.
The police do too.
Okay, because they're all liberal and
Well, it was a joke. It was also a dig at Moscow, comparing them to Moscow, Russia. Making them communist.
Excellent. There's a
So it stung.
It
doesn't hurt unless it hits a nerve. Just so you know.
Right, of course. Yeah. If it
you know when you've hurt someone when they react like you hit a nerve.
Right. Yeah. It's
true.
There's an investor named Martin Shkreli, who might be, I don't know. I don't remember how to say his last name, but I think he's maybe just a smidge older than you.
Okay.
Young guy, and he's a really.
Thank you.
I'm 30. You're 32, right?
36.
You're 36.
I just turned 36.
You're old as hell, brother. You're about to die.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Yeah. Okay. So you
can hear it in my voice. I'm aging rapidly.
That's true.
Since last episode.
Your voice sounds way better today.
Yeah.
Yeah. Jason's voice was like this. He sounded like this yesterday at church, and I was concerned.
You're like, are you going to be able to talk tomorrow?
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to try.
So Martin Shkreli bought a pharmaceutical company and raised the price of a drug used to treat diabetes because it was priced incorrectly. And that's why he bought the company, because he knew that he could correct course for the company and make them make money. And he got in the crosshairs of politicians who saw a chance to come down on a evil capitalist who's raising prices. And so he was indicted.
Accused of like price gouging, basically.
Yeah, basically
taking advantage of diabetics.
Right.
Whereas he was just charging what it needed to be.
Right.
Priced had to make money.
Yeah. So it was either I was going to raise the cost of this so that people could still get it, or the company was going to go bankrupt and no one could produce it, and now no one gets it.
Yeah.
So
which would you rather have?
Yeah. Everybody dies, or just a couple more people die. You pick.
No pressure.
Yeah, and there's a whole thing about price action and prices, and a whole capitalist argument we could make there about that, but we won't. But Martin Shkreli got indicted by Congress and didn't do anything illegal and would not have gone to jail, except for the fact that he, during the entire trial, took to Twitter to make fun of Hillary Clinton and all of the people trying to convict him, and calling them like animals and gay and stuff like that. And so they got a real big personal vendetta against him.
Yeah.
And he's also like an unlikable dork.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That doesn't help.
Yeah, it doesn't help at all. So he's like an unlikable dork who can't help but say what he thinks in his head. And he raised, there's like half the country is basically communist at this point. So it's like that they should have to pay for anything is a deep sin against their being.
Right.
And so that, he got caught up in a similar situation on a much grander scale and ended up going to jail for a little while.
Oof.
But he's back out. He's back amongst us and making a ton of money.
Still making fun of Hillary, probably.
No, he's calmed down a lot of that stuff.
Turned out he doesn't like prison.
Yeah. He. Do you know who Sam Bankman-Fried is?
Nay.
He was the CEO of a very large cryptocurrency exchange, and he was operating as a Democratic operative for money laundering through the Ukraine, and got caught for like gambling recklessly with user funds in an illegal way.
Very nice.
And he fled the country at one point when he was caught, and so he was like on the lam, and he went on this very popular cryptocurrency podcast, and they were recording it live, and he just like showed up on it and was like, "Hey, what's going on?" Or wait, no, it wasn't Sam Bankman-Fried. It was this other guy. So this other guy, this Korean guy who started this company, the company was doing nefarious things, and it caused the most recent Bitcoin crash when Bitcoin dropped from like $69,000 to like 30 something, or like 15 something.
Oh.
When that happened, it was caused by this guy, and this guy went on this the Up Only podcast, and he went on there live to try to defend himself. And Martin Shkreli like messaged the Up Only people, and was like, get me on right now. And they were like, oh, hell yes. So they brought Martin, because he's like, in the finance world, he's infamous, Martin Shkreli.
Yeah.
So they brought him on, and he was just like, hey, what's going on? And the guy got real nervous, and he was like, listen, hey, if I can give you any advice, I can just tell you, prison's not that bad. And everybody started laughing, and like, he was like, it's not that bad. You're definitely going to jail. You definitely broke the law. It's not that bad. You'll be okay. It was really, really a very iconic moment in the like alt finance world. It was very funny to watch live. But anyways, it's neither here nor there. I realize that that's like a very niche
A little bit.
Yeah. It's not that funny to a lot of people. Sorry if that was boring, but
it's funny that it was funny to you, though.
Yeah, okay, good.
There might be a couple of your listeners out there.
Yeah, my side might think it's funny.
Just roll in.
Yeah. There you go. There's a little finance lore for you, like alt finance lore. So today we're going to talk about this ad that New St. Andrews College cut. The ad is, like we said, so there's the Moscow, Idaho crew that consists of several, I think, really good pastors and educators who run several different companies and are employed by this church called Christ Church. And the whole movement is kind of spearheaded by this guy named Doug Wilson.
Wilson. You may have heard of him.
Yeah, you may have heard. You may have heard. If you listen to this podcast, it's pretty likely that you've heard of him. Honestly, not least because we talk about him at least once every 5 episodes.
But if you like this podcast, you probably also some
of
Doug Wilson's downhill stuff.
Yeah. This podcast.
We are downstream.
Yeah, we are downstream.
We're in the delta downstream of the Doug Wilson mountain spring that is flowing downhill and gathering speed.
Yes. Happily gathering speed. So Doug Wilson is very controversial, and they do controversial stuff, like cut this ad.
Speaking of controversial, did you see his? He went on Tucker Carlson.
Yes, I did listen to that interview.
The little ad that Cannon keeps on putting. The little blip of behind the scenes with Tucker and Doug standing side by side, and Tucker goes, "I'm standing here with a very, very famous and controversial Doug Wilson," and Doug Wilson goes, "Even more controversial now."
Yeah.
Every time Doug links arms with somebody, there's always a firefight online.
Right. Every time.
That's delightful.
Yes, and there was a firefight online about this. So I'm privy
about
to
the ad.
About this ad.
Okay, not surprising.
Yeah, and because there's a whole. So to give our listeners who don't understand the context of this. Some context. Now, most of the guys I think that listen to this, for the most part, I guess there's, geez Louise, dude, I'm getting all scrambled up. I'm excited. I'm caffeinated, so I'm real excited. But
oh boy,
I guess I don't. I was going to say I know most of the guys who listen to this, but we don't because we're growing. So there's like 50 people that listen to this every week.
Really?
And, yeah.
Last time you told me it was like 30.
It's. I think we're at least 40 to 50 downloads an episode now.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well,
across all platforms.
Well, praise God. I hope it's for good reasons.
Yeah,
and
me too.
I hope all you brothers out there are listening to it for good reasons. And if we get off, tell us.
Yeah, for
There's
real.
a comment section, at least on Substack.
Yeah, there's a comment section on Substack, on YouTube, and you can email us at workhard@hyperpremium.co. So you can email us there. I got to check that email. I haven't checked it in a few days. I got to make sure there's nothing there. But yeah, if you have
what is that email again for the listeners?
It is workhard@hyperpremium.co, not .com. It's .co.
Leave the M off.
Yeah, leave the M off.
No.
Yeah, no. So to give you some context, the evangelical world, the Protestant Christian world, is kind of split in half at this point, with the old guard, sort of like the old order is very focused on whimsy and being agreeable, and in the name of that, they've gotten pretty
like making peace with the progressives,
right? Making peace with the progressives, trying to
figure out how evolution works into intelligent design.
Yeah, it's saying and having female pastors and
inclusivity.
Yeah, and having
DEI.
Yeah,
nonsense.
Yeah, marrying gay people in churches and in some cases even being pro-abortion, which is crazy. But anyway, so it's split in half between those people and then the new guard, which is us, which is consistent of mostly young men, which is obviously a pariah demographic, especially amongst evangelicals, amongst the Jesus is my boyfriend. I feel good. It's all about how God's going to be there for you. And I've got a cool haircut. That's every pastor. Those guys are ultra gay and not worth listening to in most cases.
The next generation of prosperity gospel types.
Yep. And if you walk into most evangelical churches in most major cities, it's going to be that. Just shallow motivational speeches that have some scripture in them, some references to scripture.
Right. There's a sprinkling of Christian flavor in it.
Right. Exactly.
Just to be able to still call themselves Christian.
Right. And then they'll do a worship service that's all about how hard you can worship. It's not about bringing glory to God. It's about making it about how high you can raise your hands. And it's all very feminine. It's all extremely female.
Feeling oriented.
Yeah. Feeling oriented. Very like, if you're not crying during the worship service, then it's not powerful enough. Can I get the Spirit of the Lord in here? Can I get some Spirit in here? Can I get the Spirit of the Lord?
Amen.
I mean, it's not. If it was like that, that would be cool. You know, if it was like Black Church, that would be like fun. But it's not even that. It's not even that cool.
Lame.
Yeah, it's whack. So there's a war going on in the Protestant world. And Doug Wilson is, if not the leader,
he's in the vanguard.
Yeah, he's in the vanguard. He's at the very tippy tip of the spear. And so him and his boys are.
So he wades through a lot of blood.
Yeah, he wades through a lot of blood.
There's a lot of blood and guts on him.
Yeah. So him and his boys are, constantly under fire, and they came under fire for this ad again. And there's one that we'll unpack the whole ad and we'll talk about the whole thing. But there's one part in particular that I've seen people get really upset about. That is something that I personally, we'll dig into it. But it's a real axe I want to grind. And so I'm very excited to talk about it. But before we dive into really unpacking the ad, I wanted to go ahead and play it. The imagery of the ad I think is important. It makes it look cool. But the audio will suffice. You'll get it. You'll understand.
Maybe just take a moment, pause this, and go find it.
Yeah, you could take a moment, pause this. Just look up. The easiest way to find it is just go to newstandandrews.com or .edu or whatever. And the ad.
It's on Twitter. Did you find it on YouTube or is it?
Yeah, it's on. It's on the New St. Andrews YouTube channel. You can go there. It's on Twitter.
So there's multiple platforms. It's not hard to find.
Yeah, it's not hard to find. So you can go watch the ad yourself. But if you don't want to do it, we'll just play the audio for you here, and the audio will. It's the important part is the audio, so it doesn't matter. So here we go.
Wanted. Young men to rebuild Western civilization. Must be unafraid of pain, blisters, intellectual rigor, and a lifetime of long shifts with swords and shovels, digging ditches, repelling invaders, and reading stacks of books taller than their fathers. Must be impervious to manipulative women of all sorts, giggling virgins, cyber skanks, and even full cauldrons of Karens or hand-wringing clergy, but always seeking to hear and heed the words of Lady Wisdom. Immune to the leadership of hypocrites and LARPing online masculinitods, unaffected by abusive authorities, petty professors, and all brokers of official respectability. Willing to hoist the Jolly Roger and Johnny Cash's favorite finger whenever faced with idolatry. Long-suffering joy and determination required. Must be willing to dwell among the tombs and graves of the long dead, seeking truths that cannot die. Exhaustion guaranteed. Conflict guaranteed. Mortality guaranteed. New St. Andrews College. Liberal arts for the undaunted.
Great ad. Great ad. Great ad.
So powerful at the end to the point of tears almost for me with the if you haven't watched it, when he says mortality guaranteed, it says mortality and it shows the landing boats full of infantry going to D-Day to the beaches of Normandy.
Yeah, landing
and
on the
then
beaches.
the next shot says guaranteed and it's a picture of a military cemetery full of white crosses.
Yeah. And so I think that that's probably of the things to dig into in the ad, I think that's probably the thing that's the most important is that ending spot there, the mortality guaranteed. I think that's the most important thing. But the thing that I personally want to talk about, to give at least a few minutes to, is Jason's laughing because he already knows where this is going.
Yeah.
The spot in the ad where it says to extend Johnny Cash's to extend Johnny Finger's
good old
finger.
Johnny Finger.
Yeah. to extend Johnny Cash's favorite finger, and then it shows a picture of Johnny Cash flipping the camera of the bird, which is one of my favorite pictures of all time. I love
It's
that.
an icon, isn't it? It's in one of his albums.
Yeah, it's a very iconic picture.
I think you take the CD off, and it's behind the plastic, him flipping you off when you take the CD out, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's everywhere. That picture's everywhere. You just look up Johnny Cash flipping the bird.
The most famous picture of him, probably.
Yeah. It's a great shot.
The Man in Black.
Yes. And so they said, you should be able to extend these evil things, the finger. And online, a lot of people got really upset. First of all, they just got upset in general because it's a hyper-masculine ad, and that's not allowed. That's a no-no. To appeal to men's vigor in any way is illegal, especially amongst the homosexual evangelical left. But the thing I want to I wanted to really kind of unpack here is that it's I think, and I've Jason knows this. I've sent an email once to our friend group, and I kind of grind this axe personally all the time, and I myself choose intentionally to use provocative and sometimes vulgar language because I really think that I believe it's been placed on my heart that Christianity, at least a few Christians, I don't necessarily think it's like, all of them should be this way or the church should conduct itself this way. But I do think that there should be at least a few Christians who are willing to cast pearl clutching aside and risk the social backlash from their Christian peers to be vulgar. And I think that vulgarity is really important right now because there's a very serious need to mock and ridicule the current social order, both in the church and at large, and so that's something that's very near and dear to my heart because I have gotten backlash before because I'm willing to say shit and cuss speak more loosely about a man and his wife's sex life and more forthrightly address the sexual desires of young men and speak in a positive light about drinking and acting mischievously with your boys. Now I think the thing that's important to say is that those you ought not allow those things to compromise your responsibility as a man and as a husband and as a Christian. You ought not. It's a fine line you got to walk, is what I'm saying. And you need to, if you're going to be like that, you need to be. I personally am very thoughtful and considerate about what I'm doing and saying, and it's a big part of the reason even why, Jason, I asked you to partner to come work hard with me, because I knew you would be a good counterweight to me wanting to
cursing a lot.
Yeah, to me wanting to curse a lot and use undue language sometimes and speak in like broad strokes and general terms and make fun, bully people sometimes. And so it is important.
Bullying and shaming.
Yeah. Bullying and shaming. It is important to know that there does need to be a balance. There does need to be a balance. And I don't think that it's every Christian's job to walk around literally flipping people off and saying the F word.
I listened to an interview of Doug Wilson and Joe Rigby, I think.
Yeah.
So they have a regular, I don't know if it's a podcast, it's interviews.
Doug and Friends.
Doug Wilson and Friends. I haven't watched many of those, but apparently, and I don't remember his name. I think it's Sean something. I can't remember. There's another pastor who has a podcast called Room for Nuance.
Okay.
So I think he's a Reformed Baptist.
Okay.
So he seems, from the one podcast I watched, he seemed like a good, solid guy, and he was a brother who was willing to fly out and meet with Doug and actually have a face-to-face conversation with him. So that alone tells me that he's at least on the up and up,
Right.
and is willing to have the conversation, even though he does disagree on certain points. So great
Right.
respect for that man. It was a 2-hour clarification podcast interview, kind of guided by that guy, by the other pastor, because he had Ligon Duncan on. I don't know him exactly. He's an older pastor, and he might have something to do with the Gospel Coalition.
Oh, okay.
I think so. He might be in charge of or heavily involved with TJC, the Gospel Coalition.
Yep.
Anyway, he had said some things that he had taken some shots, it seemed, at Doug Wilson and the Moscow mood, as it's called.
Yep. Yeah.
Now, I don't know. Do you have a good definition for the Moscow mood? Because I don't necessarily.
I mean, I think it's just the Moscow mood meme is just this idea that Christianity needs to have a chest right now.
Okay, so it's basically what you're talking about being yourself. Is you are taking on the Moscow mood, even though you don't live in Moscow, Idaho.
I would say I think my role here is to take it even like a step further, and be a little bit more. I mean, Doug Wilson cusses. He's put out a ton of stuff where he's.
The reason I was talking about this interview.
Oh yes,
sorry, this is
let's knock it off. Yeah.
Sorry, here.
Yeah, no,
I'm
good.
getting to it.
You're good.
Within the interview, so if you make it through those 2 hours, it's not right at the beginning. I don't remember where it is in it, so I can't tell you further. Watch the whole thing. It's very good. But Doug Wilson throughout offers a lot of very good clarification. I think this is a fantastic interview for anybody who has heard of Doug Wilson in any cautionary sense and has avoided absorbing any of his material that he has put out because he is so controversial.
Yeah.
So if you've heard of him and you don't like him necessarily, or you don't already listen to him, you've probably heard of him in a negative light, or with a lot of clarification from whoever recommended something of his. Like, here's a book. It's by Doug Wilson. I don't agree with everything Doug Wilson says. He has some really good things to say about this, but he's written some stuff about slavery, and he curses a lot in his whatever. So he offers a very succinct and good explanation of how and when to use each kind of. He breaks it down to swearing, cursing, vulgarity, and obscenity, which he defines each of those 4 different types of crassness.
Yeah.
And he references the biblical reasons for doing or not doing those things, when you should not do those things, when it is ungodly to do them. And he cites examples of when the prophets or Jesus used each one of those different types. Swearing was taking the Lord's name in vain. Cursing was pronouncing a curse on somebody. May they be barren, for example. Obscenity, I think, has to do with sexuality. So things that are obscene, things that should be private, but you're bringing out into the light and talking about openly. That's obscenity. And vulgarity was crass language. He said basically, middle school boy potty humor kind of thing.
Right.
So he used each of those, and he cites examples. And it's important to note that he reads the King James Version because it's not toned down and re-edited to be more tasteful to modern audiences as far as the language used. So when, I think it's Isaiah, says that, or Ezekiel, not good with my prophets, when he uses the term filthy rags, it's actually referring to like used menstrual cloths, or tampons basically of the day. Right. So it's really nasty language to be using. Very crass. It's very vulgar. Right. But it was making a point. It wasn't just saying something gross for shock value. Right. It was saying it to emphasize how unworthy our good works are before God. What we think of as our good works, they are as if it's a bloody, nasty, stinky tampon. Yeah. Yeah, and I think one of the things that I do want to make note of here is that, like, when I'm crass, I am there. And this is a Doug Wilson point too, but there is a place for shock. There is a place for shock value. There is a place to be a provocateur.
to say that Christ was not a provocateur is retarded beyond, like, you've never read the Bible. I just don't even know what to say.
Yeah.
Like if you think that Christ weaving together a whip and going into the market and beating people was not shocking, and that wasn't part of what he intended to do, is foolish. But it's also important to note that he did that one time for an incredibly,
and not to vent his feelings.
Right, exactly.
Not because he was pissed off.
Right.
And was having a bad day, and so he kicked the dog a lot.
Right. He proved his point once. But also this is a fun side note, but I don't remember where
it was a cleansing too.
Right.
So it was it was a holy violence.
Right. One of the things that I think is pretty cool that people don't talk about is that, Christ's profession was as a carpenter, but he would have worked mostly with stone.
Right, because carpentry would have just been whatever you built things out of.
Right. And so in his area, it would have been mostly stone.
The chief cornerstone.
Yeah. And so he would have been stacked. Christ would have literally been.
He would have been very strong.
He would have been one of the more muscular people in his town.
He was blue collar.
Yeah, he's blue collar worker. Yeah, blue collar worker moving around big heavy metal or big heavy stones. And so the image you can hold in your head is of someone who's probably a little taller, probably a little bit more muscular than everybody, probably physically bigger, rampaging through the temple with weapons, beating people, and a group of kids behind him gleefully celebrating and being like, this is so fun. And so that's the image that we are in that time right now. We are in a time when being shocking and aggressive is appropriate. And people should fear you. People should fear Christians. And in that, and so, like, people fled, it worked. All the people selling and doing money exchanging and stuff, they fled. They got scared of Jesus and ran away. Because he a big part of that would have been that he was in appearance so physically intimidating that no one thought, I'm going to try to stop him.
Yeah.
So they fled before him, and obviously the Holy Spirit would have had something to do with that.
I think, and I heard recently, I had no idea how big the courtyard area was that he cleared.
Yeah.
It was like a third to like an acre. It was huge. It wasn't like 10 money changers. It wasn't like 10 tables. It was a whole marketplace he cleared out.
Yeah. Hundreds of people fled before one man. Yeah. And so he, like,
you can see how we're going to be victorious in the end.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
When he's leading the charge against Satan.
Yeah. Yes. And in appropriate times, that is what men are called to be. Men are called to be physically intimidating and provocative. And in that, and I think we are dead in the middle of one of those times. And it's a big part of the reason why I have sought out a physically intimidating appearance, and I'm not bragging. This is just a reality. You need a gun to beat me in a fight. There's just almost everyone in any given room. It is highly likely that I am the most dangerous person in that room. I've been training for years. I'm very big, and I'm super fast, and I have no problem with conflict.
There's no well,
yeah, there's if
you hesitate, you're down.
Right. But also one thing that I think Jason can attest to this is that I am very empathetic and do not provoke my brothers and people on my side to anger. I will be one of the first people to be like, "Oh, dude, I'm sorry. Yeah, let's correct this. Maybe I can do something to help out here." Like, and
yes,
so
absolutely,
you need to walk a very fine line, and you need to be able to identify who is it appropriate to provoke, and who is it not appropriate to provoke. There are people at our church who are older who I've mentioned this. There's an older gentleman at our church who's a very straight arrow who asked to listen to the podcast one time, and I sent him the link, and he never brought it up again. And
you don't know, he might still be listening.
Yeah, maybe he is. Maybe he is. Shout out to you if you are. But
do you think he knows he's the straight arrow who asked?
He's got to know. He's an incredibly intelligent person, which comes with a level of self-awareness that would mean he knows.
I think you can be intelligent and not necessarily aware that you are the only.
All right.
Maybe.
Maybe. But
that's maybe not fair. No, you're probably right that that level of intelligence does come with self-awareness, even if it's humility. Maybe I'm mistaking humility for unawareness.
Yeah. Now,
God bless him for his work.
Yes,
he's very valued and loved.
Yes, and is incredibly
We're
wise.
not making fun of him.
and if he came to me and said, "Hey, this is too far. You got to rein this in," then I would very seriously,
prayerfully consider
that advice. And I would not be like, you're just an old boomer. You don't know what you're talking about.
Right. Stand aside, boomer.
Right.
We're
exactly.
not about that.
Yeah. I would ask him to maybe come aside and pray with me and talk to me about it more.
There's a lot of boomers, I think, who are grieved over where we are.
Yeah.
And even if they were unknowingly part of where we are, they regret it.
Right. Yeah. And so,
some would very gratefully stand alongside of us and say, yeah, we need to change.
Right. And so there are like old guard people who it is appropriate to have, clutching their pearls. Like there are Christians that you do, if they're going, "Oh my goodness, I would never," then you are doing the right thing. But you need to be very cautious and honest with yourself, because it's also in Scripture that you need to be paying homage and respect to the elders in your community. You need to understand that with age does come experience and wisdom, and so you need to. I think maybe what I'm saying ultimately here is that if you're going to take the route in life that I think I've been assigned by the Lord, you need to be extremely humble. You need that has to be a part of your general shtick, is that you are very open to criticism and very open to people coming to you and saying, "Hey man, I don't think you should do this." But you also need to have the confidence to recognize when they are wrong. And I would say if you're a younger guy, like if you're in your mid or early 20s, it's probably best not to be a provocateur yet. Because you're not going to have it's unlikely that you're going to have the emotional humility to
step back and also restrain yourself.
Yeah, restrain yourself. I would say you probably need to take a couple hits in life to have your ego trimmed back a little bit before you start saying cuss words in public.
Yeah, that's a line you have to be very careful.
Yeah, you have to be very, very careful. And there are times you'll notice in this podcast, there are times where there are times in Hyper Premium in general where I bleep some cuss words but will not bleep others. And that's intentional, because there are times when I think that, you know what, that was a mistake. I shouldn't have said that. And so I cut it out, or I bleep it or whatever. But then there are other times where I knew what I was doing, and I said a cuss word on purpose, to communicate the severity of what I'm talking about, or add a level of shocking content that will grab attention, that will provoke thinking. And that's really, that kind of cuts the heart of what being a provocateur is all about, which is that you are not you are not doing it for fun. You are not doing it because it feels good. I mean, it should feel okay. It's something like you don't want to feel guilty or ashamed of doing it. That's a very good sign that
The reference that I like that I think is helpful is in, if you've not seen the movie Chariots of Fire, I would highly recommend it. But it's about Eric Liddell, who is a
you've talked about it
Scottish,
before.
Scottish, fantastic movie, older movie, but great. He ended up being a missionary. I think he died on the mission field eventually. But before he did, he went to the Olympics and ran, I don't remember how many meter races, but his sister wanted him to skip all that running stuff because she saw it as getting in the way of his true and good calling of being on the mission field. It wasn't spreading God's glory to do those things, and he was wasting his talent, basically, in a place where it didn't need to be spent. And his response to her was, when I run, I feel God's glory.
Yes. Great. Perfect.
So instead of saying it makes you feel good, prayerfully and humbly and carefully consider, are you happy because you're gleefully getting attention from all the swearing you're doing,
right,
and just being a provocateur, or are you actually bringing good awareness to God's truth in a way that woke up people who were asleep?
Yeah.
Are you being a provocateur in a way that actually helps wake up sleepy people who need to be woken up, and that ultimately they'll be guided to truth through it, not provoked and repelled by your crassness?
Yeah. Yes.
That's the key. So is the end result actually good and true, or is it just for your own self-satisfaction? Are you worshiping yourself by doing it, self-gratification, or are you worshiping God by turning over money changers' tables?
Yes, absolutely.
Two different things.
Yeah, two different things. Yeah, and so it's
but really hard to distinguish in the moment.
Very hard. And it requires a lot of, like I said, a lot of humility, a lot of being honest with yourself. And that is, I mean, I think part of the thing here is that we're trying to win over the hearts and minds of young men. I mean, that's the specific goal of this podcast. That is a huge goal of Hyper Premium in general. It's a huge goal of my life in general. And one of the best ways to do that is to be provocative and be shocking and carry your sword openly. Just have swag. And I think that's like one of the things I think is like in the Moscow mood. This is all right. I'm saying this endearingly. Okay. I love dorks. All right. But the Moscow guys, all dorks,
sweater vest dorks,
all sweater vest book reading dorks. And while their suits often look nice, they don't have a lot of swag. And even in this ad is there's a little touch of like dork. Like a little, like I watch it, and I'm like a little, like this is a little cringe.
Well, N.D. Wilson is a writing artist, and so he talks about very manly things, but it does crack me up a little bit when he is clearly really into what he thinks is a manly thing. He's talking about manly stuff.
Yeah.
Like when he's narrating.
Yeah.
And his language is very easy to spot.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because he also writes or has written for the Christian nature documentary series, The Riot and the Dance, which is phenomenal. If you want a non-BBC atheistic evolutionary thing where actually Doug Wilson's brother is a biologist who does documentaries, and N.D. Wilson, who is Gordon Wilson's nephew. Right. He's Doug Wilson's son. N.D. Wilson is an author, children's fiction author. Very prolific family.
I was about to say,
it's ridiculous, man. It's ridiculous. You talk about generational blessings and generational wealth in terms of knowledge and good influence, and I would be so grateful for all my children to turn out to be as faithful as all of Doug Wilson's children have been, and build on what I'm doing. Yeah, and do better than me.
Right. So
where was I going with this? The Riot and the Dance. But I would say N.D. Wilson's writing in it because Gordon Wilson will be the one talking in it, but clearly the dialogue is written by N.D. Wilson. If you listen to N.D. Wilson talk enough on the Stories Are Soul Food podcast,
yes,
like you'll pick up his flavor or read some of his books, and just the way he describes manliness and boyness and things like that. It's very recognizable after a little while.
Yeah,
and he's all over this ad.
Yes, yeah, and so it is funny because if you are like if you're kind of a dumb jock like I am, then there can be some gap culturally between like the Moscow guys.
You're shouting across a little bit of a chasm.
Yeah, a little bit of a chasm. Yeah, and that is a big part of what.
There's a bridge there.
Yeah.
Sometimes you got to shout across it, and it's a little hard to hear on the other side.
Yeah, exactly.
What are you saying over there, dorks?
Yeah. Why are you wearing that? Yeah. And so that's a big part of the reason why I think I want to be more crass than like even Doug Wilson. I do think I'm on the edge, though. I think I'm probably at the very limit of what you should be as far as crassness goes if you're a believer.
Should be maybe a strong word.
Yeah, what you're allowed to be. Yeah. Yeah.
That's why I'm here.
Exactly. Anyways, what were we saying? My wife ruined it, dude.
You're gonna cut that part out, right?
Yeah. I marked it. I'm on the PC now, so I can actually mark.
You can actually work things.
Yeah. I guess we'll wrap up the provocateur thing by saying I think you should be giving the middle finger to things, and you should be a little bit more crass than maybe you should than what in a normal time, in a normal age.
There are civilized Christian communities at large.
Yeah, at large, and when civilization is Christian in general, I think you probably shouldn't be this way, and hopefully I won't have to exist in a time when...
Well, there's not much need for swords when things are peaceful.
Right, exactly. But it is wartime right now.
And Doug Wilson had the great illustration in that interview of talking about how he visions himself when he uses swears or, any sort of crassness, vulgarity. He goes to the armorer and like gets his sword, and he like goes out to the battlefield, uses the sword, comes back and like gives it back to the armorer, and it's put away, and then he goes home to his family.
Right.
It's not as if he's home cussing it up and being crass or hitting his wife or anything like that. It's like he takes it out and uses the tool when it's needed, and then puts it away.
Yes.
So there's times and there's places for these things. It's not widespread like, I'm a cussing guy. I'm one of them cussing Christians.
Yes. Yeah.
It's just how I am. Christians ain't perfect,
Right.
Which is something I used to say in defense of,
Yeah.
Christians. I'm like, well, Christians don't profess to be perfect, because I would run into people saying, hey, well, that doesn't seem very Christian,
Right.
Well, I'm not very, I don't profess to be perfect,
Right.
And it was, it was meant to be to at least not say that you have to be. My impression was they thought you had to kind of be perfect to be a Christian.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, it is a process, was what I was trying to get at. But
yeah, sanctification takes time.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah, but it doesn't mean that you're not working on it, and that you shouldn't be working on honing your sword skills to use them properly, instead of just wielding that thing, swinging it wildly over your head, and chopping off your brother's head in the process.
Yeah.
Yeah,
exactly.
Watch where you're swinging that thing, man.
Yes.
You're hurting everybody in the congregation. The demons are that way.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Ah, dang. Yeah, and so that's a good illustration. Like, you do need to put it up, and like I don't. You do need to have the ability to understand where it's appropriate to say certain things and behave a certain way. But I do think the future of the church is a little bit more rugged. Maybe not the future of the church, but I think the
near future.
Yeah, the near future of the men in the church is a little bit more rugged. I think the sort of pearl clutching, legalistic Southern Baptist way of being is out the door right now. or is walking out the door. I think we're still a small subset of people, but the guys who are really trying to fight back here. But I do think that the near future of the church is going to be made up of dudes who are like us, you know, and dudes who think it's okay to drink alcohol and who think it's okay to smoke cigars and pipes. And like a few weeks ago, I smoked a cigarette. Ooh.
Did you really?
Yeah. The first cigarette I smoked in a long time.
Just because you're in a group?
I don't even. What was I doing? No, I was in here. I was sitting in here, and I had a pack of American Spirits.
Really?
Yeah.
Why though?
Sitting in
How
my
did it even
in my
get here?
I think it was from.
I mean, if you're gonna smoke a cigarette,
yeah, it might as well be an American Spirit.
Better be.
Yeah, right.
Those things are about as hard to light as a cigar.
How did I get? I think I bought them at a gas station. I don't remember. I'm not gonna remember, and it's not.
Okay, never mind.
Yeah. But anyway, so I smoked a cigarette. Big ooh. But that's like, I mean, when you really think about it, it's like that's kind of what I'm talking about here. It's like, really, fundamentally, what's the difference between smoking a cigar and a cigarette? Other than the fact that yes, a cigar is this handcrafted, artisanal experience, and a cigarette's probably in the spirit of its usage, what is it? A cigarette is a vice, a quick way to get a nicotine hit.
Sure, it's geared more towards addiction rather than contemplation, relaxation, and social engagement, which is what the cigars and pipes lend themselves to. Is more meditation and more. Zen. I don't want to use the word Zen, but the cigarettes are deliberate and especially if they have added chemicals to make them burn faster, they're less healthy there's more inhaling going on than you would with a cigar or pipe, where you're really just more inhaling kind of the atmospheric stuff as opposed to taking a big drag on it and like trying to get it all down in your lungs to get as much of a hit as possible. It's largely expired.
Yeah, and so I mean,
health-wise, I would say there's a fairly significant difference, but I'm not going to condemn cigarette smokers.
Yeah, but even then, right there, like we are now talking and thinking about the nuanced differences between like what tobacco use. Where's the line for Christians? You know, what's appropriate and what's inappropriate.
The line is always control.
Yeah.
And whether or not you are beholden to something other than God.
Yeah, whether or not you're making an idol out of it, whether or not you're turning to that thing as opposed to...
And how it's affecting the responsibilities in your life.
Right.
If you're making yourself unhealthy so that you're not going to be around for your kids getting married because you're smoking 2 packs a day.
Right.
Then that's a problem.
Yeah, if you have the thought like, oh, I need to go get a cigarette. I need a cigarette. It's probably time to.
Right. That's your red flag.
Yeah, and like you could say even with like drinking, like my policy around drinking is that I don't do it if I'm upset.
That's a good. Yeah.
I will not. If I've had a rough, I'm not gonna be like, oh man, I've had a rough week. Time to have a drink. That's not happening. I will only drink to increase the level of celebration that I'm enjoying. And so I'm only drinking if I'm in a level-headed state that is not like, oh man, whatever. Like if I try really hard if I'm upset to stick to prayer, you know? And so
always a good policy.
Yeah. And so like with drinking, you can, I think altering your state of mind with alcohol is fine. To what extent the line for me there that I often tell people is that if the way you're drinking is compromising your overall sobriety, your sense of sobriety and your ability to conduct yourself as a man, then you're taking it too far and you need to seek help. You need to pray about that, reach out to your boys, tell them you just got a bad habit of drinking.
So being merry with wine is not necessarily drunkenness.
Right.
Right. That's the distinction you're drawing.
Right. Like,
but if you have the tipsy, loosened up happiness celebration thing.
Right.
We are not convicted that is a sin. Though if you are convicted that is a sin, you need to listen to your conscience on that. And maybe God is calling you to a higher standard in that way.
Right.
And that goes back, well, I was going to say this earlier too, around who you talk about these things to and who you drink around or who you smoke around or even just who you talk about these things with is the Apostle Paul talks about, he says, I am all things to all people. In other words, if he goes to witness to the Jews, and I know he's the apostle to the Gentiles, but bear with me for a second. If he goes to a Jew's house and has a meal, he's not going to bring pork.
Right.
He's like, hey guys, I brought carnitas.
Yeah.
And they're like, and he's like, I brought this because you guys shouldn't be exercising these dietary restrictions. That's past, you know?
Yeah.
It's like he's going to go by their dietary restrictions.
Right.
And if you go to an alcoholic's house, don't bring a bottle of scotch and be like, hey, there's nothing wrong with alcohol, brother.
Yeah.
Let me pour you up a couple shots.
Right.
See if we can get you to fall off the wagon again.
Right. Yeah.
It's like there are weaker brothers and sisters and you need to not push them over the edge.
Yeah. Yeah, and there are people where I think it's maybe it's not even a weakness thing. Maybe it's just for whatever reason, the Lord has convicted them to stay sober all the time. Maybe they have a highfalutin job or whatever, and people rely on them. But then there's
Proverbs says, kings should not give in to strong drink, basically, because they're responsible for a whole country.
Right.
They have a huge amount of responsibility, so they shouldn't be drinking themselves heavily or maybe even at all because it inhibits their ability to rule.
Yeah,
if they're always on call.
Yeah, what if some catastrophe occurs in your country while you're half drunk?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're celebrating. Maybe you're not drunk necessarily, but you're celebrating what would be morally appropriate.
Right.
And then somebody attacks the gates and you're like,
oh man, how do I work this
How do
thing?
I wield this sword?
Wait, where are you supposed to go? What did we say? Yeah. And I think even then, like if you're if you're being responsible and if you're being a good actor and operating in good faith, like it is not uncommon for me to have 14 beers over the course of an entire Saturday.
Okay.
It's not uncommon. It's not uncommon for me to wrap up recording, go home. I've got tasks. I got to mow the lawn. I got to take care of this thing. Something needs to be fixed. Maybe I got to work on hyper premium stuff. I need to do some writing, whatever. And just crack one at noon and keep cracking until after dinner.
Yeah. See, for me, that would put me more to sleep.
Yeah. It's
or it
like
would put
coffee to me.
I find that it puts me in a state of relaxation that then I will become more irritable with my children or my wife if I have had one too early. So I usually wait until the evening typically.
Okay.
It's not that I will never do one during the day, but I typically stay away from one.
Yeah.
Especially the stronger one. So lager is one thing, but
right. Yeah, and let me make it clear. I'm not talking about IPAs here.
Yeah, he's not talking about Imperials.
Yeah, I drink Pacificos and Coors. Like that's what I drink most of the time.
4%ers.
Yeah. Maybe towards the evening, maybe I'll do two big boys or something. But it's what was I going to say? Oh yeah, that's a great example. Like what Jason's bringing up here, and we'll wrap this one up quick because we are at an hour. So that's a difference. That's a physical difference, right? Jason, when he drinks, he does get a little sleepy. It's happened. I've seen it one time.
Especially with the heat.
Yeah, especially with the heat. And so it doesn't, and that happens with a lot of people. With most people, drinking is like a thing that kind of dulls you pretty quickly. There's a subset of people that have a genetic predisposition towards
Germans,
Irish. Yeah, the Germanic people from the Scandinavian ethnicities, like myself,
sometimes like to down a few mushrooms before they mow the lawn.
Yeah, exactly. Like when the thing you have to consider is we're talking about this. When I say sometimes I have 14 beers in the weekend, when I have that first beer, it's like somebody taking the limitless pill. Like everything goes whoop, and all my senses get higher. I react to things faster. I can speak more clearly. Colors are more vivid. Smells are better. It's literally like drinking coffee. And when I drink coffee, I spaz out. It's not good. I don't drink coffee. And so that's something you got to consider. Like it is different. It is different for certain people. So like if you have a buddy,
chemicals do affect you differently. So go slow until you know what it does to you.
Yeah, exactly. And Jason, like even Tannen has made this comment a couple times that it's like, dude, I've seen you drink a lot and you just seem
the same,
like literally normal.
Yeah.
And that is true. Like I can drink. I drink 14 beers on a Saturday because I can, and it does not compromise my motor skills at all. It doesn't compromise my ability to speak or think.
You know what's funny is you were not the first friend I've had of your genre.
Okay. Yeah.
If you will.
Yeah.
Friends are in kind of categories.
Right.
I see them. And you're not the first guy of your type that I've gotten close to or been buddy with.
Yeah.
So it is funny to me that I tend to find guys like you who are heavier drinkers who can take a lot of drink and be fine.
Yeah.
And are like very jovial and outgoing and loud.
Yeah. It is always that is the
tends to be
personality
the
type
kind that meshes with mine for whatever
Yeah.
reason.
I mean, it makes sense. And I always, like, all my really good friends are like a little bit more reserved, a little bit more like empathetic, a little bit quieter, a little bit like more intentional with their words. They're not a verbal sledgehammer like me. But anyways, yeah. So that's it's funny that that's a little bit off topic, like the drinking and smoking thing. But I think it's just it does speak to the like.
It still relates to the theme.
It still relates to the theme. So guys, I mean, I think an hour in, we'll say this. And this is good, man. This is we're going to get 2 episodes out of this. Because we still haven't even talked about the mortality thing yet.
The St. Andrews Part 2.
Yeah, St. Andrews Part 2.
That's what I said.
Part 2, yes. I can't speak French.
Neither can I. If anyone out there speaks French, they know I can't.
Yeah. So listen, guys, you need to be careful. You do need to be careful. And maybe I'm not the best. I don't set the best example in the world to follow in lockstep. But I do think, even saying that, I do think it is time to cast aside much of your concern about offending and start intentionally trying to offend. You do need to be sincere, humble, and honest with yourself about the things you're doing and saying. But it is time for rough and tumble Christians. It is time for Christians to be okay physically throwing punches.
The response you should be ready for the people who come to you and say, hey, that was offensive. Instead of saying, screw you, I don't care. That's your opportunity to talk about it and say why. You can't continue punching somebody in the face after they've come to you and go, that hurt.
Yeah. Or please stop. Okay, I'll listen to you now.
If they're in conversation with you, that's the goal.
Right, exactly. That's the goal.
Part 2 is now you talk to them.
Right.
Don't continue punching.
Right. So you drop the offensive manner and become compassionate and empathetic and put yourself in their situation. What did you say that could have offended them? Let's unpack that. Why do you think it's offensive? Here's why I may or may not. Whatever.
Let's talk about whether or not it was appropriate for. If you have the humility to say, let's talk about whether or not it was appropriate for me to say that.
Yeah.
I'll explain to you why I said it, or maybe give them the first word because they've already come to you.
Right.
Why did you think it was offensive? Is it simply because you were raised being told that's a bad word, you don't say that?
Right.
Which is appropriate when you're a child. You don't say these things.
Right.
And then you learn later on, just like sex. It's like, no, you don't. Like you don't. You dress in a different room than your siblings, and you don't expose yourself to other people. And then you learn later on, it's like, well, there's one person you expose yourself to all the time.
Right. Exactly.
And it's good.
Yeah.
It's not bad in that context.
Right.
So let's explain why I use this word in this context. It was for a scalpel precision reason.
Yeah.
And maybe you weren't the person who needed the surgery. So maybe you didn't even need to hear this necessarily. The message wasn't for you.
Yeah.
That's the other part, the other clarification that Doug Wilson put in this interview. And I should say, so the video on YouTube, I think, is called Nuance for Moscow Mood. And it's on Canon Press on their YouTube channel. He said Doug Wilson for like multiple decades has been writing and trying to minister to the same group of people. Mm-hmm. So not everybody needs Doug Wilson's flavor.
Right.
And so a lot of people who don't need it, well, some people are stung by it because it rings true. Some people are offended by it because they realize what he's doing and hate it. And other people are woken up by it and come to him and go, oh, this is what I needed to hear.
Yeah.
So those are at least 3 categories of people who react strongly to what Doug Wilson.
Yeah. Oh, dude, you know what's a perfect example?
Yeah.
The early
point is that sometimes you're not the person who's writing to. So if it doesn't ring true for you, you're like, I don't understand why you're saying these things. He's like, well, I wasn't writing to you.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. There.
So you're a perfect example. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. All good. In the early episodes of this, when it was just me on Work Hard, I said I was talking about Seth Rogen.
Yeah.
And I was my goodness. And I said I was talking about how stupid he was. Uh-huh. And I said the phrase
with you so far.
Yeah. I said the phrase Seth Rogen, if we ever meet in person, you are going to be rethinking your stance on the Second Amendment. And then I said, I am on site with you, nigga. And my wife's sister heard it.
Okay.
And was appalled. And was like, he can't say that. That's so bad. And was like talking to my wife about it. Was like, he shouldn't be talking like that. That's terrible. And then my wife's brother heard it and came to me and was like cry laughing about it.
Because he got it.
Yeah. And being like, dude, that was so funny. And he is the exact demographic that this show is aimed at.
Yes.
And her sister is not. And so
one, because she's a woman.
Right. She's a young woman and he's a young man. And so that's a really good example, is that you do need to be paying attention to like
why our wives maybe are not hungering to listen to these all the time.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, another episode dropped.
Yeah, great. I'm so excited. I can't wait to hear my husband say the N-word. Which my wife does actually have to hear me say the N-word at least once a month, but,
it's in your marriage contract.
New marriage contract is required.
It's weird. She wrote it in.
Yeah.
Should probably unpack that.
Yeah. Probably should. That's weird. It's an odd one. So yeah, but I mean, that's kind of exactly what we're talking about here, is like, you may be aiming to offend someone, which, I mean, honestly, I am, when I said that, when I say things like that, I am partially kind of trying to offend the Jesus is my boyfriend crowd.
Oh, sure.
And I do
because he's not.
Yeah, he's not your boyfriend. And I want you to go, he shouldn't say the N-word. He shouldn't threaten violence against someone. And then I go, well, why not? And then they say, and then they have to think about it.
Right.
And they might be right.
And then you're in a conversation, at least.
Right. And then we're in a conversation.
It's not them being angry and leaving.
Right. Yes.
Which is the end goal. Is to be is to be in the conversation.
Right.
Again, your goal is not to offend people so they flock away from you.
Yeah.
It's to send out a flare.
Right.
And that blinds a couple of people and they go, ow, that was bright.
Yeah.
Why would you make that so bright?
Yeah.
Like, because it's dark in here.
But I do think that there is room to say that sometimes you are occasionally, there are people, this is a Gene Wolfe thing. There are people who have of their own volition sacrificed their humanity. They have decided that the burden of being a human is too great a burden to bear. And so they have decided to become animals. And those people are beyond your capacity to save. Those people are in the hands of the Lord. And, but they have chosen explicitly to position themselves against mankind, to position themselves against humanity and against humanity's creator. through their position against humanity, they have positioned themselves against its creator. Just implicitly, that has to be the case. You can't be an honest follower of God and hate humans. And with those people, it is, I believe, a righteous action to do something that so thoroughly offends them that they will not, they just write you off and are like, I'm not going to talk to him ever. If that means that while you're doing that, while you're being provocative and offensive and ridiculing those people and their idols, you attract people who
hate those
idols,
or we're just waiting for somebody to speak up.
Yeah, who hate those idols or waiting for somebody to speak up, or who may be becoming attracted by those idols, who are not yet fully converted, and then all of a sudden see someone who they think looks cool and talks slick and is funny. They see someone with swag, that is a human element, man. If you see someone you think is cool, especially young men, if you see somebody you think is cool and they go, that thing over there is gay, young men are going to go, yeah, that is gay.
They're like, or they might be like, it is?
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is.
Well, I don't want to be gay.
Yeah, I don't want to be gay. And so I think it is appropriate at times, very sparingly, to identify groups of people who are demonic in their predisposition and go to war with them for the explicit reason of attracting people who still have hope, people who have not totally given themselves over. And in those instances, you are not trying to provoke a conversation with the person you're offending. You are explicitly trying to drive them out and win a battle against them. And in the name of that, win over more people to your side. But
which is God's side.
Yeah, which is God's side. Yeah, sorry, not your side. God's side. You're trying to win them over to God's side. But again, those situations are even more rare. And if you're finding yourself monthly, maybe even yearly, in a position where you're having that exact fight, you better be pretty freaking honest about whether or not you're doing the right thing with you better very heavily consider, what am I doing? And I would recommend seeking out counsel of wiser men, to make sure that you are not being undue in your crassness. So just be sparing with that, with what I just said. But I do think it is appropriate to really, become verbally quite aggressive with some people in some cases.
And it doesn't even involve crassness. Sometimes I had the biggest Facebook fight or debate I ever had was I asked and said, I don't remember what the question was. I posed a question and posted it.
Yeah.
About what instances are there any medical reasons that necessitate abortion?
Yeah.
Something like that. Some girl cussed at me and defriended me immediately.
Yeah.
And anyway, there was like a son-in-law of a past pastor who got in a debate about me, and it's like, man, I'm in the muck all day in the emergency room, people are in darkness, but he was being very empathetic, as in like, you got to get down on their level, that kind of Christian. And
which is kind of a scourge right now.
Yes. Anyway, point is, there was including mine, there was over 100 comments on this one thread, which I've never had anything like
pop
that.
off
The
like
back
that.
And forth with with multiple people.
Yeah.
There was 2 or 3 or 4 people I interacted with through multiple back and forth comments, like long paragraph comments too. I've never had anything like that before. But I didn't I didn't say something vulgar or obscene. It was a question.
That's a very good point. Yeah.
So the thing you're talking about, it doesn't necessarily, you don't have to pose it in an offensive way for it to cause big waves sometimes.
Right.
If it's a hot topic and you're addressing it even just really level-headedly and even-keeled, like I believe I did, people went nuts about it.
All right, well,
go to church, everybody.
Yes, go to church, everybody. Find a young woman, get married, have as many kids as God will let you have. Yeah, please, 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 don't be scared, man. I think that that's the way we can sum this up is do not be scared. Have the confidence to stand up for what you know is right. Have the confidence to be offensive with what you know is right. I have made enemies. I have gotten close to losing jobs. I've stood on business, baby, 10 toes down on business. I've done that before, and I'll do it again. And that's you have to do it. You have to do it. But in the name of that, be honest and sincere and very, very, very prayerful. Don't just be willy-nilly with it. But anyways, guys, we love you. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.